Good afternoon, everyone. We are moving closer and closer and closer to our actual noon start time. I still see folks trickling in. Thank you for joining us. I'm gonna wait just a couple more minutes before we dive in. Maybe people are grabbing some lunch, taking their time. So we'll wait just a couple more minutes and then we'll dive in with our presentation today. If you've just recently joined and you're looking at the controls in front of you and have some concerns, we are participating today in a Zoom webinar, which is different than a Zoom meeting. So you have different controls available to you, and I will get into those details a little bit more before we really start. But rest assured, we are going to make space for all of your questions. We just want to have a little bit of space in the beginning to make sure that we don't get too much feedback from mics and things. So you don't currently have the ability to mute or unmute yourself. We'll talk more about that in just a couple minutes. Give everybody just a few more minutes to join us here. Actually, as we're waiting for folks to arrive, if you are comfortable with the process of renaming yourself, we have some more detailed instructions a little further on in the presentation if you aren't familiar with that process. But this is important simply for our notes after the meeting to ensure that if questions are asked, we have full names in the notes. So if you see yourself represented, the way your name is written for your Zoom profile, if you would be willing and able to change to your first name and your last name, if it isn't already written that way, that would be helpful for our notes following public comment. If that is complicated or doesn't work out for you for one reason or another, we will, of course, ask you for that in the moment when we're asking and answering questions. But we could save a little time and effort now if you are comfortable getting started with that. As I say, on our next couple slides in, we'll have a little more detail about that. So if you don't know how to do that, no worries, we will provide more instructions as we go. And we're a couple minutes after. I know a lot of you are probably attending on your lunch break, so let's go ahead and dive in. Of course, if folks are continuing to join as we get started, that's great. But we will get going with our 5th Avenue Northeast Sidewalk Project open house meeting today. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Marilee Jolan. I'm part of the outreach team for the 5th Avenue project, working with the City of Shoreline. We'll do introductions and let you meet everyone who's going to really be giving you information as we go. My role is today is primarily to help make sure the meeting's moving, changing up the slides, making sure we don't have any technical glitches, things of that nature. So I'll mostly be in the background, but I'm here for you if you need me. We are going to get started here with our agenda. So we've got introductions, which we'll do in a moment. We're going to talk a little bit about the larger overall plan for Shoreline Sidewalks, of which 5th Avenue is a part. Then we'll get into detail about our 5th Avenue Northeast project. And of course, have some time for questions and answers, which may be the most important part of the presentation. Here's a little bit about where we're at with Zoom. So you may have heard as you were joining the meeting, me talking a little bit about that we're participating in a webinar today, which is different than a meeting you might have attended. You'll notice you don't have a mute button. The beauty of this is that you can't accidentally unmute yourself and have any embarrassing or sticky situations for any of the rest of us. What you do have available to you is this question and answer button, which you should see in the top or bottom, depending on how your layout is of Zoom. You should see a button here that looks like this. And you're welcome to use that throughout the presentation. We will be doing questions at the end, but if a question pops into your mind, and like me, it might tend to pop right out for you if you don't get it written down somewhere, you're welcome to submit it throughout the presentation, and then we'll just go in order and make sure we get all of them by the end. We spoke a little bit briefly about the renaming yourself. This is to simply help us with our notes. We will, for any questions or comments that come up, we will want to be able to say the first and last name of the person who made that comment or had that question. So if you have done this before and are familiar, please go ahead and rename yourself. If you aren't, you'll find a tricky little spot. Zoom likes to hide these things. If you start at your participants button, it should pop out a little new pane for you, the top of which looks like this. And then at the more button, you'll get this option to rename. And at that point, you can then go and kind of click and add your first and last name, which I see most folks have done. I do see a few first name onlys. If you're able to put that in, if that's working for you, please do. If it doesn't, as I said, when the time comes and a question is asked, we'll just ask you then to spell your first and last name for us so that we can make note of your question and comment. And then you'll see on here, if you have a pen handy or another way to note, if you wanted to note down this number, or honestly, probably my email would even be best. Something strange happens to you during the meeting and you need some technical assistance, you can feel free to reach out that way. You're also welcome to, of course, put a question in the question and answer section for me as well. I'll be monitoring that, but this might be a slightly more direct way. I think those are all of my getting us started with technical aspects and what we'll be talking about today. So I will go ahead and hand things over to Laura, who will introduce herself and get us going on content.
Great, thank you. Well, hi everyone. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Laura Ryder. I'm the project manager with City of Shoreline, working on this sidewalk project and a lot of the other sidewalk projects in the city. Yeah, and our main consultant here is KPFF. Nathan, go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm Nathan Anderson, a civil engineer with KPFF, and I am the design lead for this project.
Great. So a little bit of history, how we got here. We can start off with the city's sidewalk prioritization plan. This was something that we did in 2018. So there was a sidewalk advisory committee and many people, residents throughout Shoreline helped with the sidewalk prioritization. And what we got out of that were 12 specific sidewalk projects that we had determined based on a bunch of matrix, including safety, equity, proximity. So location next to schools and transit stops were put above other ones. And then connectivity. So a lot of these like fill in big gaps we have in the sidewalk system. And these were all part of the bond measure that went out and was approved in 2018, which increased sales and use tax. And all of those funds will go into the design and construction of these 12 specific sidewalks. So the city currently is in the design stage for 2 of the sidewalks. And one of them is this sidewalk, which we're all here for, the 5th Avenue Northeast project. So we are building sidewalk on both sides of 5th Avenue, and that will connect from 175th, the intersection of 175th and 5th Avenue, and then it will go up to about 182nd Court. Most of you, I'm sure, are familiar with the area and the construction that's currently happening on 5th Avenue to reconstruct the roadway there and tie into the 185th Street Sound Transit station that's coming, excuse me, in 2024. So 5th Avenue was prioritized with the city because of the Sound Transit station, and we actually are receiving funding from them for this project as well. So this is only partially funded by the bond. And that would bring us to the timeline. So we're still pretty early in the design process at this point. We're closing in on 30% design. And we expect to be completed with the design around summer of this year, hopefully with that going out to bid by the end of the year and construction starting in spring of 2022. Because it is so preliminary, this is subject to change. So it may be delayed a little bit, but because of the funding with Sound Transit, it has to be completed before 2024 when that opens. So if it doesn't get constructed this spring, it will be in 2023. And then that brings us to more of the project scope, which Nathan is going to take over.
Yes, thank you, Laura. So I'm going to give you some details on the project. As Laura said, new curb and sidewalk on both sides of the road. That west side sidewalk is going to extend a little further north to connect to the new trail along the rail. We're going to have some pavement widening to accommodate some new bike lanes. There's going to be some areas that are going to have 2-foot buffer space between the bike lanes and the travel lanes. And then we've gotten a lot of complaints on drainage in the area. We know that's an issue. There's catch basins that are overtopping. So we're working with the city's surface water group to look at ways that we can expand capacity for storm drainage in the area and combine it into this project. And then there'll be some new driveway connections as well. Next slide. Sorry, so mine's, okay, here we go. Yep. So this is an overhead.
About that, Nathan.
That's okay. This is an overhead view of the proposed features. So this orientation north is to the right, and we're showing the southern half of the project. So this figure shows the new sidewalk, pavement, and driveways. And as Laura said, we're only at 30%, so still fairly early in the design process. So starting at the south end, the left side of your screen, at the 175th intersection. So on the east side of the roadway, we're going to be maintaining that existing sidewalk and large retaining wall there next to the church property. That east side sidewalk is going to start just past the existing bus shelter that's there. On the west side of the roadway, we're going to be widening and adding space for the north and southbound bike lanes and new sidewalk on the west side. This area, there's just not enough space for the bike buffers. It's just a little too constrained. As we move further north, just past Serpentine, that's when we're going to be adding those 2-foot bikes buffer space between the bike lanes and travel lanes. As I'm sure you know, there's some large power poles, especially on the east side of the roadway. Those are big Seattle City Light transmission poles. So we're trying to avoid any impacts to those. So likely you're going to see the sidewalk go around the backside of those poles. There are some smaller poles on the west side, and we're probably going to need some relocation for those poles. Next slide. And then this is the north half of the project. So 180th there. There's going to be new curb ramps. The crosswalk that's currently there is going to basically be in the same spot. It'll just get restriped after everything gets repaved. The north side of the project there, you can see that connection to the future 5th Avenue realignment, which is currently under construction. And then on that west side, you see the sidewalk kind of extending along, and there's the new trail along the rail that it connects to. And next slide. So this is a section view, and that's going to show some of the dimensions of the roadway. So 6-foot sidewalks, 5-foot bike lanes, 2-foot buffers, and then the 10-foot travel lanes. As you can see, we're showing a block wall there on the left side. That would be the west side of the road. That's not going to be needed the whole way, but there are going to be some areas where we're going to need walls and pedestrian railing, and basically due to the steep slopes that are currently out there now. Unlikely that we're going to need walls on the east side. And just note our original section, our concept actually included some planter strip between the sidewalk and curb. ultimately, we eliminated that just to skinny up the roadway a little bit to reduce overall impacts to the corridor. And we'll talk about those here. Next slide. So we're still early on. We don't know all the construction details yet. We think it's going to be about a 6 to 8 month process starting in 2022. We don't know exactly how it's going to be phased. You're likely going to see some lane closures with local traffic only, and there'll be some individual coordination on driveway reconstruction. And then trees, one of our biggest concerns is reducing impacts to the trees. We do have an arborist on our team who's going to be advising us on the tree impacts and how close our construction can get to the roots so to save trees. We know there's probably going to be some removals, but we're really going to try to avoid all that we can, and we're looking at design tweaks to make that happen. But ultimately, our goal is to deliver the city's long-term plan for this corridor, but we're trying to balance that, of course, with the trees and saving as many as we can. Next slide. I think we are on to questions. So is there anything, Laura, you wanted to set up the questions with?
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
Really, anything you have, we'll try to answer today. And if we can't get to them, please feel free to leave your email address or your phone number, and I'm happy to reach out to you later.
We do have one question already that came in the midst of the presentation. I'm not sure if you all can see that or I'm the only one who can. But it looks like this is from Mel Hessels. And Mel, I'm going to go ahead and just allow you to unmute give you the opportunity to unmute yourself. You could go ahead and ask it live, or if you'd prefer, I can just read it out loud.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so my question on the west side, where, currently there's several properties that have parking areas in front of their home that, we've put it, there's a house with gravel, there's some with even concrete. That's basically where I guess is right in front of the fence line. So I'm wondering, is there going to be any parking remaining, or is this going to be everybody has to park on their property? There's no space for guests to park. What's going to be happening?
I'll go ahead and start. Yeah, so the current plan would not allow on-street parking. That space is going to be utilized for the sidewalk and bike lanes.
On both sides, there's no on-street parking?
That's correct.
Wow, that's a pretty huge change.
We have another question that I think is similar. So I want to go ahead and read it. Yeva, please forgive me if I've mispronounced your name, is asking, there seems to be no street parking. Is that true? Yeva, I'm going to go ahead and let you unmute yourself if you would like to respond. Did we answer that question already? Do you have additional to add?
Hello. Yes, you basically answered that question. Though to expand on it, is there what about is there going to be any impact to the existing I guess unregulated the side streets, like along 180th, the stub of 180th and the main street of 180th, where right now there are no sidewalks? Theoretically, people could park there and walk around the block if they're visiting.
Yeah, correct. Currently, we will not be having any restrictions on the side streets. This project is really just for the 5th Avenue corridor. So yeah, your side streets will still look the same. There won't be any work on them.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a couple more coming in. Thank you all for using the Q&A so nicely. Patty is asking about sidewalks on the east side, north of 182nd Court. Are there plans to continue, and how do folks get to the station from where the sidewalk ends? Patty, feel free to unmute yourself and add to that if you'd like.
Well, actually, yeah, you read my question just as I typed it. So
Okay.
I see where the sidewalk ends and ties in on the west side to the rail along the trail, but since the mapping doesn't go any further and doesn't show what happens once you get to 185th,
Yep, it's a good
you
question.
have to make a lot of assumptions. And I have a real problem that if you don't have sidewalk continue on the east side,
Right.
more than just wrapping the corner of 182nd Court, it's really kind of fruitless and an unnecessary expense to put in sidewalk on the east side for those two properties just north. I mean, because that's the sidewalk to nowhere.
No, I agree. And the answer is that the Sound Transit project, it's not shown very clearly on our figure, but that project will include sidewalk on the east side. So our east side sidewalk is going to connect to theirs. That will continue on north to the new station.
Okay, so they picked up the remaining missing piece.
That's
and
correct.
then just the other comment, for those who live on Fifth, I feel your pain. Obviously, we've gone through this in the Ridgecrest neighborhood already when bike lanes were put in on Fifth with no input from the residents. And we've had several folks lose their on-street parking. We've also had several folks end up selling their houses. We're talking people that didn't just move there. We're talking people that have been there 20, 30, 40 years, all of a sudden no longer have on-street parking. So this is going to be a really big issue. I don't know whether or not there is any further consideration, Marilee, or whoever can answer this, about maybe losing that cushion for the bike lanes and reconfiguring so that you have at least parking on one side. You certainly don't have a separation between bike lane and traffic lane south of 175th. So why do it here?
Yeah, I mean, if you took away the 2-foot buffer, a parking lane is at least 8 feet. So there's just not enough space to have sidewalk and bike lane and parking. That's just too wide of a corridor to fit within the existing right-of-way.
Okay, so then just one more question to add on to that. So is Fifth meant to be the main traffic automobile boulevard to get to the station? Or is that really shifting more to 8th or 10th? What's the thought? What's the main feeder to get into the station with a vehicle?
Well, I think there's multiple. Fifth Avenue definitely being one of them. I think the city's goal was to make it more friendly to pedestrians and bicycles, to encourage that type of travel. But you still have 185th, and that also has bike lanes and sidewalks. So yes, I think really the goal is to increase the non-vehicular modes of transportation.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Thanks, Nathan.
Natasha, I believe, has a question about the west wall. Natasha, let me give you your mute power.
Hello.
Hi.
I have a question. Sorry, I zoomed in like a little bit late in the meeting and I didn't hear all of it. And my question, I heard about the west wall, and I'm wondering, I was looking at the map, and I don't think we have the section between 175th and 180th. I don't see it in the map, and I'm wondering, is there going to be walls on that section of west wall on the Fifth Avenue between 175th?
Yes,
yeah, between 178th and Serpentine. Is that the wall that's like drawn in there right now?
There will be
Like
segments there will be segments of wall on the west side throughout the corridor. Most of those walls are going to be what we call fill walls, in that the new sidewalk is going to be above the existing grade, and you have to fill that in with a wall. I think there are a couple locations where it's going to be a cut wall, where you have a steep embankment and you excavate into that and you build a wall to retain that earth. So I'm not sure specifically where you're talking, but yes, there will be segments of wall along the corridor on the west side.
How about specifically between Northeast Serpentine Place and Northeast 178th Street?
So right now we are looking at that area. Our 30% design does include a wall there. It's maybe 2 or 3 feet, but we do have some trees there. So we're really looking at ways to avoid impacts to the trees. So what's going to be the final result, I don't know. We might be shifting the road a little bit to avoid that. We might be using some sort of a elevated walkway system, or we might, because of, the costs or other constraints, we might end up having to put a wall there. So we just don't know specifics just yet.
Okay, I was just wondering. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. I'm going to go over to Mel. Feel free to unmute and ask your follow-up question, Mel.
Yeah, I think Patty actually asked the question, but I didn't hear it get answered. Since we are still in the design phase, is there any chance that we can look at getting parking on at least one side? Because as she mentioned, up from 175th, they lost it on at least one side, which, does create a problem when there's people visiting, when people have parties or whatever. And on this street, we're looking at only Serpentine, 178th, and 180th. In between is just a bunch of private roads. So we just don't really have any parking there when guests come. And certainly we have seen streets be busier. So what is the chance that you could look at, trying to have parking at least on one side of the street?
Laura, did you want to take that?
I can take that. So because we are so early in this, it's definitely something we can look at, and we will evaluate if we have room. The main issue in this section is it's a pretty constrained right-of-way section, and we are trying to reduce the amount of impacts we have on all your private residences. We really don't want to have to get any right-of-way acquisition as part of this project to keep costs down. So that's the main issue we're facing in this, and we can't eliminate the bike lanes or the sidewalk on any of these areas. We are able to reduce some sections with the bike buffers, and we can look at, especially in the northern parts, like above 178, where it gets a little bit less constrained, we can definitely see if we can fit it in. And we'll take a look at that, but that's something we'll have to definitely evaluate in more detail later.
And is there also a trail? I know that in some parts there's a trail running near the freeway. Mm-hmm. Is that also running all the way up along the freeway to 185th, or?
Yeah, so you can kind of see it in this section. It's the trail along the rail that's under construction right now, and that will go along the freeway there, and then we'll have that connection right there at 182nd to it.
Okay, that's nice. So can I ask, how would we as residents get involved if we want to see changes made to this preliminary design, other than attending this Zoom call?
Yeah, so if you go on the website right now that we have for Fifth Avenue, there's a little survey that we have posted there. And if you want to have your comments recorded and everything, feel free to fill that out. It's pretty much just a comment box and then an optional demographic survey. Okay. But we will be doing a summary and reviewing all of these outreach comments and everything. And that's a great way to make sure that it's on the record.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Great. And it looks like we have one more question from Christina here. And Christina, if you wouldn't mind, if you could begin by letting us know your last name and how to spell it for our notes.
It looks like she doesn't have a microphone. So I'll go ahead and just, go ahead.
Great, go ahead. That's fine, Nathan. Let's read the question. But Christina, I believe the way it works is that I give you the ability to unmute yourself, and then you still have to go in and do it in order for us to hear you. If that's what's going on, give that a shot. But
she might not even
read the question. Her
computer might not have a microphone. I'll go ahead and read it. So she asks if Fifth Avenue will be one of the main ways to the station. Will there be a walk signal for the 180th Street crossing? This crosswalk is often ignored by through traffic. So right now our plan is not to have an enhanced crosswalk there, which would be some sort of push button, lights flashing, signed crosswalk. You know, my first response is, yeah, I see what you're saying. That is a corridor where people tend to speed. It's nice and straight and wide. Keep in mind the future corridor is going to be more constrained. We are tightening up the travel lanes. We're going to have striping for these buffers and bicycles, and you're going to have curb and sidewalk. Naturally, that kind of slows vehicles down. And I'll let Laura answer. I don't know if the city has looked into warrants for enhanced crosswalk at that location, or if that's something they want to pursue.
We are doing a lot of like mid-block crossings and other enhanced crossings around the city right now. This is not one of the locations that we're planning on putting that, but it's definitely something I can bring up to our traffic group and we can discuss it in more detail.
We have, I think, a similar question from Susanna about the Serpentine place, traffic coming along there as well. Susanna, would you like to add to your question?
No, it is very similar, but as it is, because Serpentine Place turns when cars come around that corner heading west, they turn so fast, and anytime you're walking there, you feel like you're going to get hit. So I'm wondering whether anything could be done to mitigate, or how people will be able to cross safely there without having to be threatened by the cars.
Yep, that's a good question. And you're kind of working, the geometry of the roads working against kind of safe speeds right there, because it is kind of skewed. It allows people to make quicker turns. One of the easiest things design-wise would be to construct kind of a small curb bulb in which the sidewalk would kind of come out into the roadway a little bit and then back. I don't know if there's enough space for that right now. We'd have to look at it. But thanks for your input. I think that's something maybe we can see what we can do there.
That would be appreciated.
Along a similar line, I expect you see it there, Nathan, but Mel is making a comment regarding 5th and 180th. Consideration of something like a lit crossing, if someone pushes a button there, would be great.
Yep, duly noted. And I think, as Laura said, that's she's going to bring that up with the traffic group, and we'll voice these concerns and see where that goes.
Well, those are all the questions I've seen come in so far. We're at about 12:35, so don't want to belabor the point if we have answered all the questions, but we do definitely still have time. If there are additional thoughts, Patty, I see your hand up. Go ahead and unmute.
Because I know you're going to have several of these open houses, and different people from different areas are going to attend, and obviously then the questions are different. is there going to be at the end of this process some kind of transcript or a recording that we can access so that we can hear all the other questions and responses?
Yeah, so we're recording this right now, and that will go on the project website, and any of the other online open houses and webinars that we do also get recorded. And we'll have those posted on any of the project websites. We're also in the middle of doing an overall implementation plan for the sidewalks throughout the city. And we have some plans to rejuvenate that main sidewalk webpage. So that should have a lot more of these questions as they come up. You should be able to see the plan for when they're going to get constructed and schedule out everything and the impacts. And then that can be a good landing page for all of these other individual ones, which we always make sure to post everything that we do for outreach efforts. Probably just these recordings for the webinars, but sometimes we post just the presentations that we do or summaries of outreach and the questions.
So are you thinking about doing a transcript of that with like, say, like, here's a page of Q&A that came up during the course of all of these Zoom meetings on this particular project, so that you don't have to listen to the presentation 5 times, be able to hear the questions from 5 meetings?
Yes. So we have done that, like essentially like an outreach summary, which we summarize all the questions and then provide answers for everything. And I can definitely make sure that that's something that we prepare after all of these, so you don't have to rewatch all of the Q&A.
It's not that painful, but after the 5th time, it might be. Anyway, thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.
Absolutely. Have a comment here from Christina. Even putting the crosswalk on the north side of 180th would be helpful. It is a blind turn for cars turning off of 5th onto 180th Street eastward. If you have pedestrians on the south side of 180th, there are so many trees the turning cars can't see them. Christina, if you'd like to add anything additional to that, or Nathan, do you maybe have...
No, I see what she's saying. I'm just looking here on Street View. I think there's potential for that, but also keep in mind a lot of that brush and maybe some of those smaller trees would get removed in order to make way for the sidewalk and the curb ramps and all that's going on there. So you would have better sight distance. So that might alleviate the issue you're talking about. But I don't see a big issue with necessarily moving it to the north side, but that's something we could evaluate as we get further into the design.
I also see Robert. You have your hand raised. I'm going to give you permission to unmute yourself.
Hello.
Hi.
My name is Robert Ibsen. Last name is spelled I-B as in boy, S-E-N. And my question was, is there any plans in this about street lighting?
Laura, do you want to take that? I don't think we currently have any plans for street lighting.
No, that wasn't in our plans as of right now.
Okay.
Do you have a comment on that? If I assume you live close to the corridor. Yeah,
It doesn't have a lot of street lighting on that Fifth Avenue, and I think with the sidewalks and everything, you know, if they could add some street lighting along the way, that would be helpful, especially with all the pedestrian increases and bikers that could be going up and down there. We don't want to get anybody hurt. So
right. Thanks for the comment.
Yeah,
Sure.
That's great.
Well, we've come to the end of our questions again. I'll give the same call yet again. If you've had your questions answered and you have no more, great. We'll definitely give a few minutes here. We still have some time before the end of our meeting time if additional thoughts, questions, or comments arise.
Banana. Puppy.
Go ahead and scroll us back here. Again, not to rush you at all, but we do have some additional ongoing contact information on this last slide. So it's certainly a time you could make note of that while we're providing just another minute or so. Thank you, Mel. We see your comment. Thank you for the thanks. We're happy to be able to share